Well, the AUKUS submarine deal is being billed as one of the largest announcements made by an Australian Prime Minister in decades and the most significant defence investment since the Second World War. With a 30-year lifespan, it is designed to endure long beyond the governments of today through whatever changes of administration there are in Australia, Britain and the United States. Let's go live to San Diego and bring in Chief News anchor Kieren Gilbert. And Kieren, you have breaking news on the nature of the cost of this submarine deal, expected to be worth more than $200 billion over 30 years.
Yeah, Andrew, you're right. That is the ballpark. It's hundreds of billions of dollars we're talking about here. But I can reveal on Afternoon Agenda this afternoon that the Prime Minister and the government won't be giving us a dollar figure over that 30-year lifetime of this project that you spoke about. There will not be a dollar figure for that longer-term project and the overall cost. The way it's going to be described in the budgetary impact is going to be as a percentage of GDP, and that is going to be over 0.1% of GDP throughout the lifetime of this enormous project. So no dollar figure for the overall cost. You're right to say it is going to be in the hundreds of billions of dollars, over 200 billion, but they're not going to specify a number in terms of the overall cost. It will be characterised as a percentage of GDP and somewhere over that 0.1% of GDP every year throughout the lifetime of the project. Now, I am advised that in the forward estimates there will be a specific number put. So when Jim Chalmers delivers the budget across the forward estimates the next 4 years, the costs in that short term will be detailed. And in the 10-year period, the medium term, there will be a price range given or a price estimate given. So short-term specific numbers across 4 years, a medium-term range given across 10 years, and across the lifetime of the project, it will be over 0.1% of GDP every year. That's the way that cost is going to be detailed. But as you've said for a number of days now, Andrew, it's running into the hundreds of billions of dollars.
And Kieren, the Congressman Joe Courtney let out some of the details of the announcement yesterday. Second-hand subs initially. He said they won't be clunkers. That's his term, not mine. He said speculation of joint crews was overhyped, meaning Australians would crew their own boats. What do you make of what he revealed?
Yeah, well, it fits with what we've been briefed over the last few days. There are already submariners working with the US Navy. There are 3 graduating in mid-year June from the US nuclear sub school, 3 officers. They're going to move on to Virginia-class submarines in July this year. So they're already moving on that. There's already that exchange of officers and submariners working on US boats. In fact, they've done that for a long time. But the detailed training of operating a nuclear reactor on board a nuclear sub, that's stepping up, and it's stepping up right now. As for the clunker question, well, these things have life cycles of decades. They will run for many decades. So he's right to say that these are going to be well-equipped, state-of-the-art. As a senior figure put it to me, these are the apex predator when it comes to naval capability, not just in the United States, but they have dominance in the seas around the world, Andrew.
And he also said, Joe Courtney, he said you basically need these nuclear subs because the current diesel electric subs have to be above surface and are sitting targets. So what do you think of that? And do you think we'll get 10-year-old subs or 20-year-old subs? That's the question. If they've got a life cycle of 33, I guess we could make do with 20-year-old subs.
Yeah, well, exactly. They don't have to. The nuclear sub it doesn't need to come up to refuel. It doesn't need to refuel. Whereas the conventional diesel electric, they've got to come up, and they've got to come up for quite a period of time. And while they're at periscope depth, they are visible. They're visible at that point. They're vulnerable. And with the sonar capability of others like potential adversaries in the region, building all the time, they've got to make sure their stealth capability is there. And that's what the nuclear sub gives our Australian Navy, or will give it. That is the capability to stay below the surface for longer. They don't have to come up for as long, if at all, and really limited only by the limits of human endurance, Andrew, given the nuclear reactor on board. And it's been made as simple as possible for our submariners to operate. One US Admiral described it to an Australian colleague as saying, we take the kids are potato farmers in the Midwest and we make them nuclear reactor operators. We can do it pretty quickly. So they're quite, I wouldn't say confident about training our submariners as much as we need, but they're certainly feeling, I think, relaxed about it. They know it's a big call, but they believe that we're well placed to do it.
Now, Kieren, it does sound like a pretty complicated announcement, though. Do you see any pitfalls with going American subs first, then British? Because, I mean, for example, we might well end up with Keir Starmer as Prime Minister soon. Is there any concerns around a change of administration kind of messing up this arrangement? And what do you think of the mix? America first, Britain second?
Yeah. Well, the way I described it, Andrew, is that we've got two tracks here, and both with inherent risks. You've got the industrial risks of running both submarines and having to operate both, and then you've got the political risks of three governments across multiple years and decades, and the risks inherent in the political process as well, whether it be Keir Starmer or a Labor government or any government in the UK that might go against the whole idea of AUKUS, or say a nationalist president, maybe Trump 2.0 or Trump himself, who knows, down the track saying we're going to rethink this. So there are risks inherent with the whole thing. You've got two types of submarines, Virginia class from the US, then that British design with US combat system. A senior source said to me in the last day that that wouldn't be the way we would have done it if we had the perfect scenario, but we don't have the perfect situation right now because this capability gap has opened up. So with the capability gap that's opened up, they've had to bring in the US Virginia class and then that longer-term Australian-made product with the British design down the track.
And Kieren, I guess the point on this, you can have contracts, but we saw with the French subcontract, there's all these gateways where it can be broken.
Exactly. So we've got very recent history to show us some of the pitfalls in terms of that industrial side of things as well. So there's that. There's the fact that we've got to build up our submariner capacity, but then the industrial capacity as well to be able to build these things. So huge amount of challenge, but both sides of politics see this as a risk worth taking. It's not just that range we're talking about with the subs, Andrew. It's also these are more lethal ships. You've got not just the old school torpedoes, but vertical missile tubes, which means vertical launch capacity as well. So the lethality of these vessels will also be increased.
Now, Kieren, I'm conscious that a number of ministers today are heading to Western Australia. So I imagine there's an announcement in terms of that. Yeah. The government sees this as huge in the industry policy space as well, don't they?
It does. Absolutely. And so my understanding is that in that short-term period, while we are starting to get some of the visits here of US Virginia class, that at the same time, that industrial base in Australia will be contributing where possible into that production of US Virginia class subs here in the United States. So there is that component. Then the way these visits are going to occur from 2027, I think the best way to think about it is like the marine rotation in the Northern Territory. That's going to be a similar sort of model. They won't be based here. We don't. In Australia, the US ships won't be based in Australia. They'll have rotations like the Marines already do in the top end. They'll be there a lot. They'll be there basically all the time, but not bases. More a rotation approach.
Now, the PM looks pretty excited, doesn't he? Can I ask on a lighter note, is there any particular reason why the Chief of Navy, when he went for a run with the PM this morning, was also wearing a Rabbitohs hat? Mark Hammond.
I'm told he's a big Bunnies fan as well. So Chief of Navy, Prime Minister, share that in common. So apparently it wasn't just a show for his boss. It's the fact that
good to hear.
supports the red and green, my friend. Yeah.
That is good to hear, that it's not just, it's not just for the boss's benefit, Kieren. We'll talk to you next hour. Thanks for your time out there this evening in San Diego.
Thanks, Andrew.